Herb's heroes. I just want to go
what's
over
up
that
all
outline.
you
I think
lovelies?
it'll give you a good overview
Well,
as to the type of person Herb was and why he
right
was
now
that way. So
I was actually going back from Flatty's hotel to my home. So the journey is gonna be from Mall Road to actually Wabda town. So we can possibly record some 25 minutes. So I'll try to make sure we record each and every bit of it. So right now we are on the Mall Road. We are gonna turn left. And at this time there's no rush, there's no traffic. Let us clear the screen as well. So it's red light, green light. So we are relatively gonna reach faster and we are gonna cruise back home. Not as in like we are gonna put on the cruise control, which this car has, but anyways, it's gonna be a very smooth drive. It's 1 a.m. I was working at the from the lobby of the Flatty's hotel, had my dinner over there, had some good time, productive time. I usually go to coffee shops or like hotels to, if I need to work with a lot of focus. So anyways, right now it's time to head back home. Even in Riyadh, I usually am out and about pretty late at night most of the days, and sometimes I have to work at night. So it's like quite a different sort of life and schedule over there. It's quite weird, to be honest. Sometimes I have to work day and night and I get the next day off, or sometimes I have to work like 14-15 hours, sometimes 10-12, sometimes even 9. So there's no like fixed schedule. Based on the work needs, our duties get adjusted. But thankfully I'm here in Pakistan on a vacation, so it's all quite convenient. I'm making good use of my time, alhamdulillah. I'm trying to do the best that I can while I'm here, including recording this drive. So hopefully all of this will bear results, some good results. So it's green light. So this car has some tint over here on the top, so I think that there's a motorcycle coming from the wrong side. So I should bring this camera actually down. Don't mind the interference, but like this. Now I think you could be getting some better view. Well, it's not that different, so I'll bring it up here. By the way, check out the greenery on the Mall Road. Even on the Canal Road it's quite green. This is Lahore, and you need to see the lamps on a tree over there. Some lights over here and lamps on a tree. Check that out. MashaAllah, 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 Tabarakallah. Let's come into this lane. So the speed limit for this road is 60 for LTV for the cars. For HTV it's 40. During the day there is a rush on this road, so it's not like you would be cruising along this road. You can't. By the way, there's an interesting thing along the corner over there. There's a photo of Quaid-e-Azam, not like a photo, but they have made a like a sketch of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah out of these lights. I'll show you that. The founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And these are the scenes over here. Bikes, everything. So here in Pakistan you have to be very mindful of the bikes. So there you see, there's the sketch of Quaid, our leader. That brought Pakistan into existence. Alhamdulillah. Here on Canal Road the speed limit is 80. But on a normal road in Riyadh the speed limit is usually 80. So check out the beauty of the canal. I was listening to the founders podcast. I opened one episode on Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwestern Airline. I have been on it while I was visiting US. So let's listen a little bit of it as well.
During the Great Depression, his father worked in a soup factory. Herb's older brother was killed in World War II. Herb is 10 years old at this time. After his brother dies, his father dies unexpectedly the year after. And then within a few years of that happening, Herb's two surviving older siblings move away for college. So now Herb grows up. The second half of his childhood is just him and his widowed mom. And so her influence and the lessons that his mom taught him, he uses his entire life, including in building his company. So they would have late night talks almost every night at the kitchen table. And even when he was a kid, they're staying up till like 2 in the morning. And she's teaching her about life. And one of the most important things that she did was she taught him that adversity is a normal way of life. This is a woman that lost her son, lost her husband, and yet there was no self-pity whatsoever. She said that stress in difficult times was not debilitating, but opportunities to excel and achieve. And so even from a young age, he starts to find problem solving invigorating. The reason I've always admired her, I try to consume as much information about her as possible. And the reason it came to the top of my mind to make an episode about him right now is because I was reminded of something that he said during a talk. And this came many years later in his life. He's already been working on Southwest for multiple decades at the time. And he was asked, you undergo a lot of stress all the time. How do you handle it? And his response is perfect. He said, I don't handle it, I like it. And so that's a maxim that I want to repeat to myself. As we're building our companies, difficulties and hard times are inevitable, and I'm just going to remind myself, I don't handle my stress, I like it. It completely changes your mindset to like, this isn't something I have to do, it's something I get to do. Back to his early life, he was a gifted athlete. In high school, he ran track, played basketball and football, and lettered in all 3 sports. Before college, he works at the very same soup factory that his dad had worked at, and he works there for 6 years. He did every single job at the factory. This is something he's going to continue to do at Southwest, which we'll talk about later, but this is why I'm telling you this. He called his 6 years working in a soup factory, right? This is a guy that's going to go on he's really gifted at everything. He's gifted at athletics, he's really good at college, gets a law degree, clerks for the Supreme Court, has a successful law practice, and at 35 with 4 kids decides, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to try to start an intrastate airline in Texas. And so with all that, the fact that he said the 6 years at the soup factory doing every single job, he called it the best education he ever had. And so even when he was younger and then throughout his entire career, people say the same thing about him over and over again. They describe him as a fierce competitor, and they said he had a hard work ethic. That is a quote, a hard work ethic. He was working 100-hour weeks at the beginning of Southwest because he still had to practice law to pay the bills. It took them 4.5 years between the time they raised money for the company, they started the company, and then they're actually allowed to fly their first flight. Another thing about Herb, he was old school. He was hard driving, hard drinking, fast living Texan. He started every day early. regardless of how late he was out the night before drinking. That's going to come up over and over again. Another crazy thing, he smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day and drank Wild Turkey bourbon every day. He said Wild Turkey and Philip Morris cigarettes are essential to the maintenance of human life. When he was
What
in his
is this?
60s, he fought and beat prostate cancer. And then he was asked if he thought his smoking habit contributed to his cancer. He said, "I do not smoke with my prostate." He lived until he was 87. He felt he was born to be an entrepreneur. He thought the spirit of an entrepreneur was within him. And he had a great line about this. He says, "If you're crazy enough to do what you love for a living, then you're bound to create a life that matters." He designed his entire business model to keep costs at the lowest possible level. He built the most successful airline in history. Southwest was profitable for 47 straight years. To put into context about how outrageous that accomplishment is relative to his competitors and peers, he was profitable for 47 straight years. The next most successful airline was profitable for 5. And when you read about Herb, or if you listen to his interviews, like, he's hilarious. So, and he says, like, I don't take myself too seriously, but I take competition very seriously. Unsurprisingly, one of Herb's favorite people is Winston Churchill. He'll quote Churchill all the time. He'll use Churchill's ideas in talks and speeches to his employees and to his team. One of his innate talents that jumps out if you read a book about him is the fact that he was able to operate on very little sleep. There's a lot of stories in both books about the fact that he'll be out drinking until like 3 in the morning, and then he'll be at the office at like 7 a.m. He also talks a lot about and repeats the importance of having a business model that endures the hard times. Talks about most of the airlines are set up, they'll reap a bunch of profits in good times, and then yet they give it all back when the inevitable downturn happens. And so one thing he talks about is like, listen, we'll joke around, we'll have a lot of fun, we're very extravagant in our marketing, but we're very fiscally conservative. We're conservative with debt. They paid for 80% of their planes out of earnings. Most other airlines are borrowing that money. They own the largest amount of planes outright than any other airline. And the quote that came to mind when I was reading about Herb's financial approach to building this company is this fantastic quote from Charles de Gaulle, where he said, "All that matters is to survive. The rest is just words." Herb was also a gifted storyteller, and he was very persuasive. He was not building a company. He was leading people on a crusade. He was not hiring employees. He was converting missionaries. He says, "Our indomitable dedication is the core of our success. That is the most difficult thing for a competitor to imitate. They can buy all the physical things that we have. The things that you can't buy are dedication, devotion, loyalty, the feeling that you are participating in a crusade." And the one thing that Herb was insistent that they do better than anybody else was serve. Listen to what he said. "We are a service company. We just happen to fly airplanes." Herb read all the time. Last week on the Working with Jeff Bezos episode, I mentioned this text I got from a friend where he noticed he raised a bunch of money for his company. He noticed like every single billionaire that he interacts with reads a ton, and they usually read a lot of history and biography. Herb was the same thing. You know, he starts off as an attorney. Before he dies, he's a billionaire. He read all the time. He did it when he was younger, did it when he was older. History was his favorite subject. He said, this is why he said he read history. This is fantastic. He says, "Reading history kept me from making the same mistakes." That was inside and outside his own industry. He definitely knew the history of the airline industry. He talked about over and over again that you should read the history of the airline industry as a cautionary tale. That's why, well, the main thing we talked about today is the fact that this guy, very obviously capable of independent thought, his main advantage was the ability to question every single conventional, quote-unquote, conventional wisdom in his industry and ask, does this make sense or not? Some of it did make sense, so he would do that. But in many cases, he realized there was a better way, and so he would pursue that regardless of what people around him were doing. And then finally, before I jump into the other book, he led from the front. This is one of the most admirable things about him. On the busiest day of the year, which is Thanksgiving Eve, you would find Herb out on the tarmac, loading and unloading baggage. And he would do so regardless of the weather. There's a great story in the book where somebody walks up to him. They just see this really tall guy in a yellow poncho loading and unloading bags. It's not until he turned around they realize that's the CEO and the founder of the company. Okay, so now I'm going to pick up the book called Nuts, and I'm going to go right into the founding of Southwest. At the time, remember, Herb is 35. He's an attorney in San Antonio, and he's got 4 kids. Southwest Airlines was a brainchild of Roland King, a San Antonian entrepreneur who owned a small commuter air service, and his banker, John Parker. Parker complained to King that it was inconvenient and inexpensive to travel between Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, and suggested starting an intrastate airline. And so Herb gets involved because he's Roland King's attorney. And so Roland King goes to Herb, and he draws this thing called the Golden Triangle, which shows Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. It's on a cocktail napkin that cocktail napkin is still framed inside of Southwest headquarters. This is happening during the late 1960s. This is why they think there's an opportunity. First of all, they use the word intrastate airline, which is fascinating. So their main goal is, okay, there's different regulations. You have state regulations if you're only flying within the states, and then obviously federal regulations once you go state to state. Getting approved to fly inside a state is easier than at the federal level at this time in history, although it was still very difficult getting approved. This is just like 4 years about it. But the reason, what I found fascinating, is Roland King had this idea by seeing California already had a successful interstate airline, and he thought there was a lot of similarities between California and Texas, obviously the size of the states, but the fact that there was hubs of cities that were experiencing rapid economic and population growth, but they're also far enough apart to make travel by bus or car very inconvenient. And so at the beginning, their idea was like, well, why don't we just take what's obviously working in California and do the Texas version of this? And in one of his interviews, Herb talks about this time. He's like, why would you want to do something, like take this big of a risk when you're 35 years old, you have 4 kids, you're married? And he said the allure of doing something different. I wanted to do something exciting. I was curious. Also, most adults in the US had never flown because it was too expensive. I believe there was a huge untapped market out there. And his assumption that there's a huge untapped market out there was proved correct. He had to go through 4.5 years. That's to prove that assumption, he had to first fight through 4.5 years of a legal battle and unfair trade practices in the state of Texas. So he files Southwest application on November 27th, 1967. And he does so with the TAC, which is the Texas Aeronautics Commission. They approve it. They say, yes, you can fly between Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. What he didn't know at that time was that he inadvertently started a war that would last for years and almost drive Southwest Airlines out of business before it put a plane in the air. So he had 3 main competitors, Braniff, Trans-Texas, and Continental. And they immediately sue, and they get a temporary restraining order that prohibits the TAC from issuing Southwest a certificate to fly. This case goes to trial. They argue, hey, these markets that Southwest wants to serve, they're already saturated. There's no room for another carrier. The court that they bring it to agrees. This immediately sparks Herb's innate, like, competitive, have-to-win personality, and so he appeals. That appellate court also says, no, you cannot do this, so they lose that case too. At this point, they had raised, so it says the original investors, $543,000. Remember, that's a 1970 man. That's a lot of money. Had been eaten up in legal expenses. The corporation's liabilities grossly exceeded its assets, and there was no prospect of raising new capital without the TAC certificate in hand, which 2 courts have both denied them. And so this is Herb's response. Some members of the board thought it was wise to cut their losses and close down. At this point, Kelleher's street fighting spirit surfaced. Gentlemen, let's do one more round with them. I will continue to represent the company in court, and I'll postpone any legal fees, and I will pay every cent of the court costs out of my own pocket. The directors agreed to give it one more shot, and Kelleher argues this case all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court, and he convinces them to overturn the lower appellate court's decision, and Southwest gets its certificate to fly. And so we go back to this idea that Herb framed life and everything he did as this grand epic, right? We're not building a company, we're on a crusade together. It's always a mission bigger than himself. And he talks about, like, he was asked in an interview, like, why would you do this? Like, why would you be willing to fight for years for free? And he said it's because these other airlines were trying to offend one of his ideals. He said if other airlines could prevent Southwest Airlines from starting, then that means the free market system is failing. And one of the things that motivated him was to validate the free enterprise system. And the other reason, he said, was that it was very hot competition and I like to win. So then they're able to raise more money, they buy planes. They wind up starting to sell tickets. 2 days before their first flight, their competitors wind up getting another injunction, and they get another restraining order, this time from a different regulatory body, that would prevent Southwest from beginning service. And this was Kelleher's response. He went straight to the law library and worked all night to decide how to proceed. He found a precedent and presented his argument to the court the next morning. The Texas Supreme Court ruled in Southwest's favor again and ordered the lower court judge not to enforce the injunction. Kelleher then telephoned Muse. So at the very beginning, he was not running Southwest. He is still going to, for the first few years, he's going to be a founder and a board member of Southwest, and he's still running his law practice. It's not until the CEO that the founders hired, this guy named Lamar Muse, he's going to leave to start a competitor against Southwest. The CEO that comes after Muse doesn't work out, and so the board's like, Herb, if this is going to, like, you have to do this. And here's an interesting side note for you. Lamar Muse, who I'm about to introduce you to here, winds up, when he leaves and starts Muse Airlines, many years later when he's about to go bankrupt, Herb buys his airline. But that's many years into the future. Let's go back to this. So the Texas Supreme Court says, hey, you know, you cannot enforce this injunction. Kelleher then calls Muse on the phone and says, put the planes in the air. When Muse confided to Kelleher that he was still concerned about a sheriff showing up to enforce the injunction, Kelleher didn't mince any words. I told him, you roll right over that son of a bitch and leave our tire tracks on his uniform if you have to. The very next day, June 18th, 1971, Southwest Airlines was finally off the ground. And so this is the first mention of something that repeats over and over again, the fact that Herb was a master at turning things into a cause. So it says the seemingly insurmountable obstacles thrown at Southwest are what created Kelleher's passionate love for the airline. They would put 12 or 15 lawyers on a case, and on our side, there was just Herb. They almost wore him down to the ground, but the more arrogant they were, the more determined Herb got.
So by the way, this road leads to Wabda town, and I'm gonna end the video here. So, well, that's it for this video. Let me know how you like the whole scenes of Lahore at night, the Canal Road and the Mall Road, and we'll see each other in another video. Thank you. Bye.